all of heaven held its breath, till the throne was moved for good, for the Lamb that conquered death. And the dead rose from their tomb, and the angels stood in awe, for the souls of all who come to the Father were restored.
The Church of Christ was born, in the Spirit lit the flame. Now this gospel truth of old shall not kneel, shall not faint. By his blood and in his name, in his freedom I am free. For the love of Jesus Christ, who has resurrected me. Praise the Father, praise the Son, praise the Spirit, three in one. God of glory, majesty, praise forever to the King of Kings. Praise forever to the King of Kings. Lost are saved, find their way at the sound of your great name. All condemned, feel no shame at the sound of your great name. Every fear has no place at the sound of your great name. The enemy, he has to leave at the sound of your great name. Jesus, worthy is the Lamb that was slain for us. Son of God and man, you are high and lifted up, and all the world will praise your great name. All the weak find their strength at the sound of your great name. Hungry souls receive grace at the sound of your great name. The fatherless, they find their rest at the sound of your great name. The sick are healed and the dead are raised at the sound of your great name. Jesus, worthy is the Lamb that was slain for us. Son of God and man, you are high and lifted up, and all the world will praise your great name. Your great name. Redeemer, my healer, Lord Almighty, my Savior, defender, you are my King. Redeemer, my healer, Lord Almighty, my Savior, defender, you are my King. Jesus, worthy is the Lamb that was slain
long stretch there. But just to remind you, on this one, in the middle part, there's kind of a call response for just a little bit of it, where I'll sing a praise and you'll sing it. We just do that just a little bit, and then we all join back in. But I didn't want to catch you by surprise too much on that. Raise a hallelujah.
Raise a hallelujah in the presence of my enemies. I raise a hallelujah louder than the unbelief. I raise a hallelujah. My weapon is a melody. Heaven comes to fight for me. I'm gonna sing in the middle of the storm. Louder and louder, you're gonna hear my praises roar. Up from the ashes, hope will arise. Death is defeated, the King is alive. Hold on me. I'm gonna sing in the middle of the storm. Louder and louder, you're gonna hear my praises roar. Up from the ashes, hope will arise. Death is defeated, the King is alive. Sing a little louder. Sing a little louder. Sing a little louder. Sing a little louder. In the presence of my enemies. Sing a little louder. Louder than the unbelief. Sing a little louder. My weapon is a melody. Sing a little louder. Heaven comes to fight for me. Sing a little louder. In the presence of my enemies. Sing a little louder. Louder than the unbelief. Sing a little louder. My weapon is a melody. Sing a little louder. Heaven comes to fight for me. I'm gonna sing in the middle of the storm. Louder and louder, you're gonna hear my praises roar. Up from the ashes, hope will arise. Death is defeated, the King is alive. I'm gonna sing in the middle of the storm. Louder and louder, you're gonna hear my praises roar. Up from the ashes, hope will arise. Death is defeated, the King is alive. Raise a hallelujah. I raise a hallelujah. I raise a hallelujah. I raise a hallelujah.
Let us pray. Father God, thank you so much again for this time and this opportunity. Lord, thank you for moments moments to remember who you are, to remember how great you are, and to remember what you can do. So, Father, as the message is brought this morning, I pray, Father, for open hearts, open eyes, and open ears so that we can hear and respond. Lord, thank you so much. Praisings in your Son's name. Amen.
Good morning. Well, I'm excited about some things that are going to be taking place. First and foremost this morning is I'm fulfilling a promise I made to God 22 years ago. 22 years ago, I was where Ross Grawl is. You're going to be hearing him speak in just a few moments. I believe God was calling me into the ministry, but I didn't know exactly what I was going to be doing, where I was going to be doing it, or how. And I remember approaching several pastors and asking if there was any way, since I knew God was calling me, that maybe they would allow me to preach. And over again, all I heard was, that's my pulpit. Nobody gets in the pulpit but me. And I remember that bothering me so much. And I'm like, goodness gracious, that doesn't sound right. And I told the Lord that if I ever got in a position to where he was calling somebody around me, that I would make sure he had the ability to preach the Word of God, and then we would evaluate whether or not God's got his hand on him. Amen? And so that is what's taken place. There's a young man here that believes God's calling him. He's been teaching in North Myrtle Beach Middle School, correct? Or you're at the high school. I told Hunter that. He told me you were in the middle school. Didn't I say high school? Yeah. All right. But that being said, you're teaching in the high school? No wonder you want to go into the ministry. My goodness. Goodness, great. No, but he lives in Longs, and I just want to let you know that another reason I'm excited is because he wants to plant a church in Longs. And why should Loris First Baptist Church care? Why should we care? Well, first of all, we should care because everything we do as a church should be based on the Word of God. Amen? And specifically what Jesus said about his church. And first and foremost, he said, go into all nations and make disciples. Well, we physically ourselves cannot go into all nations. And I'm so excited about what we're doing and fulfilling what Jesus has told us to do in Jerusalem. But there's also a Judea, Samaria, and the outermost part of the earth. And so we are doing things in Jerusalem. We have our worship services, our Sunday schools. We've had our discipleship classes, which we will get back to when God removes this virus. We've had Bethesda Home for Single Mothers. We work at the Giving Hope Gardens. We've got the Good News Club for the elementary. See, that's us working, trying to get the gospel all throughout Loris. We're in 3 different senior adult homes. And so all of that is part of fulfillment, what God's told us to do. But I've said before, that's like putting deodorant under one arm. It's the right thing to do, but it doesn't go far enough. You got to go all the way through what the Lord has asked us to do. And that includes some of what we're doing in Israel. We're planting churches in Israel, helping Afif. And by the way, that's going great. They had to shut down because of COVID as well, but they're back up and running again, and so are the house churches. And then you're so faithful in your giving to the Great Commission, which allows us to have missionaries in the North American Mission Board. We've got over 10,000 of those, and then also the IMB, which has over 5,000 around the world. Those are all good things that we're doing. And part of what your money goes to is paying for us to have church planning specialists. And one of them is here today. His name is Tom Gore, and he is working with us in the Waccamaw Association with the goal of helping us plant churches in the Horry County area. Now, why do we need churches in the Horry County area? Well, do you realize for every Southern Baptist church there are over 4,000 people living in Horry County? For every one Southern Baptist church, there's over 4,000. Do you realize in less than 20 years it'll be one for every 5,000? Horry County is one of the fastest growing counties in the state, and Longs is going to be the fastest growing area in Horry County. What I mean is that in the next 20 years, there'll be over 240,000 people will be moving into Horry County area. Do you realize that's about a 3.8% growth rate, which is very strong? Do you realize in Longs it's going to be almost 15% growth rate? They're going to go from 13,000 people in Longs to 35,000 in less than 20 years. Guess what? A lot of those people coming in, based on the statistics, less than 3% said they're interested in traditional churches. Many of them are coming from up north. And by the way, if you were up there in some of those crazy Democratic states, wouldn't you come down here to live? But they're not coming down. They're not coming down here because they love our Bible Belt. They're not coming down here because they want to hear Southern Baptists preaching. But you know what? The Lord's bringing them down here because he does want them to hear the gospel. So we have to find ways to engage them. And there's no greater way to engage communities of lost people than to plant churches around them. Churches that are a little bit different, a little bit flexible, the same gospel message, but doing it in a way that allows us to reach people that won't just come walking in, Loris. Now, some of those will, and we'll welcome and we'll go, but many of them are going to need new strategies to reach them. And that is part of our mission as well, to make sure we do whatever we can to grow the kingdom of God. And so church planting is integral to that. Now, one of the reasons I brought Ross here, yes, to fulfill my promise to God that I'd allow that, but the second is to introduce him to you. Because as we prepare our budgets for 2021, I'm going to be asking you, do you think church planting is something we should be involved with? Right now, we have Living Water Baptist Church helping support Ross, and John Grawl, most of you may know him. He's from Living Water. He's mentoring, and we're helping. There's 4 of us in a consortium. We have a pastor from Mount Pisgah and that church, a pastor from Lakeside, correct, and that church. And they invited me to be a part of it. And I said, before I would introduce it to Loris, I want him to come and speak. And then when we get together and do our top 10 for 2021 of what we want to concentrate on, what we think our God's calling us to do, if church planting is there and y'all have had a chance to meet Ross Grawl, maybe we'll get more involved with supporting him. So that's what I want you to pay close attention. As he's preaching, as he's going, do you believe he's called by God? But if you say, yeah, but I'm not sure we need to plant more churches, that is just not, we do. We need more churches. Do you realize if God, how many would like everybody in Horry County to go to church? Or do you really? Because we have so few churches that if everybody went, we'd have probably about 7,000 people would show up here. How many would like 7,000? Sammy, would you like 7,000 people to show up here on a Sunday morning? The answer is y'all wouldn't get in. We need more churches. Yes, we want to pack this one out, but the bottom line is we need to let the Lord know that we believe he can do it, and we're going to work to provide more churches so that when he does it, there's room for everybody. Now, that being said, Ross is going to come up here and preach the gospel, so listen very closely. And then in the future, I'm going to be asking you questions. I'm going to be saying, do you think, number one, that we should be involved with church planting? And then number two would be, do you think Ross Grawl is someone that we would feel comfortable supporting? Does that make sense? All right, now that you understand all that we're here, Ross, no pressure, but it's all on you now. Let's give him a warm welcome.
Good morning. That sounds good, by the way. It's been a long retreat from civilization, it feels like, hasn't it? My name is Ross Grawl, and my beautiful wife is here, and we have 3 children, and they're joining us today, and I'm excited that we could come and join your church this morning. And so I have an important question I wanted to share with you. When you walk into a church, what side of the church do you sit on? Are you a right side person or a left side person? Now, what I like is that y'all have a middle option, which throws me completely, and it would bother me immensely because I don't know what I would choose. And I know that's a weird thing, but like literally, we've started visiting churches recently, and I've realized I'm a left side sitter. John picked this side. That is not for me. But I love my mentor. He chose there. I'm a left side sitter, okay? And you don't realize this until you've gone into different churches, and you're like, I'm literally way more comfortable over here. Like, I don't know why. It's my comfort. You guys in the middle are probably in trouble because most churches don't have a middle. You're just going to be out of luck. But it's silly the things we find comfort in, isn't it? It's just, it's one of those things. But what's a great reality is that God really desires to be our comfort, and that's what we're going to talk about today. As we get going and I share my testimony with you and what God's called in our life, one of the things I really have been moved by is how much God saw me in my comfort and wanted to move me into something better, something more. He desired my comfort in Him. And so that's one thing that I really hope that you were able to take today and really and just latch on to. So this all started about 5 years ago. And hopefully you'll be able to, by the end of this, kind of relate and see where we're coming from, why the importance of church planting is there, but also really more importantly, my calling and our family's calling to church planting. Today, most church planters that I've talked to and evangelists, they like to really hang on to the New Testament. I've just been moved lately by the Old Testament and some of the promises God made, even from the very beginning, to see his beautiful story laid out from the beginning of creation. And so today, we're actually going to be in Genesis 12. And so if you want to turn there now, we're just going to do the first 4 verses. And I'm going to read them to you, and then we'll commence with a prayer to thank God for his word. So I'm going to let people turn. They need a pause there. All right, so Genesis 12, 1 through 4. If you're familiar with this at all, this is the beginning of Abraham's story. And matter of fact, at the time, he's just Abram. So I may mix his name up a little bit, and I apologize in advance. But let's read God's word. Now the Lord said to Abram, "Go from your country and your kindred and your father's house to the land that I will show you. And I will make you a great nation, and I will bless you and make your name great, so that you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and him who dishonors you I will curse. And in you all the families of the earth shall be blessed." So Abraham went as the Lord told him. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for your word. And God, I just ask today that you would pour me out and that you would fill me with the Holy Spirit. Allow me to share the message that you have for the people here today. Father, and I just ask that I would just be your faithful servant in through this process. We thank you and we love you and we pray all these things in your Son's name, Jesus Christ. Amen. As I mentioned before, God called our family to be uncomfortable. And by that I mean he really called us out of our comfort. I grew up in Deep South Georgia. So being a Christian in Deep South Georgia is much like it probably is here in Loris, which is, a lot of people who the end of their checklist is Sunday morning. Go to church more often than you miss, right? I went to a Baptist elementary school, and so I was surrounded by this same kind of thought. And to be honest with you, by the time I got to high school, I knew all the right answers. I knew all the Bible stories. I could tell you and quote you verses that you needed. I was proficient in Bible knowledge. I was not proficient in a relationship with Christ. My faith was extremely comfortable. I knew that I could check off a couple lists. I'm good. I didn't have to sacrifice to believe anything. And the reality of this is that what I really was I was not comfortable with God having control of my life. I wanted to be a football player. Clearly, this is not the body of a swimmer or a runner, okay? Just isn't. I know who I am. All right? The Lord made me this way. Don't you laugh. And I was willing to do whatever it took to accomplish that goal. And there was a lot of people who said I couldn't, and I worked really hard. But I was not willing to let God kind of interfere with that. It's like, I can't trust that. God's crazy, and he does wild things. C.S. Lewis said, is he safe? He's wild, and that's exactly how I approached it. I was like, oh, no, God can't have control of this right now. I got things I got to do. This is my plan. And I was very fortunate to have some accomplishments. God blessed me even though I was really not wanting him to have much hand in my life. And oddly enough, what that turned out to look like was that I was trying to be my own God. I was trying to control things and run my own life. And it's funny how when you look at your life and you realize that, especially for me, a lot of my sins are related to my pride. That's what makes sin so appealing, and it makes obedience so difficult. And so, as we look at Genesis 12:1 today, we see God there. God is described, he desires. In 12:1, you see the point of he's desiring all of us to seek reliance in him. To fully rely on God. That's what he's calling Abraham to do, and he's still calling us to that today. God gives a command to Abram, and he says, hey, I need you to leave everybody you know. I need you to leave everything you own. I need to leave all the comfort and people you have. And I need you to follow me somewhere. And he doesn't even give him like a landmark or a Google, a direction. He just says, I just need you to leave. All these things that Abram would have found comfort in the world, God was asking him to give up. He was telling Abram, I need you to follow me obediently. God desires this kind of obedience, and this kind of obedience is extremely uncomfortable because we're no longer in control. As I mentioned before, I was not okay with God having full control of my life, and again, I understood the Bible stories. It wasn't a lack of knowledge. And this continued for a long portion of my life, almost 30 years. In 2014, I was still holding on strong. I got this, God. Don't you worry about my life. I got this. But man, God is so good, and he is so gracious, and he kept putting people in my life, and he kept steering me to him over and over again. He used the Holy Spirit to convict me. One weekend, my wife and I were invited to a marriage retreat in Myrtle Beach. And we were so excited because we had a weekend away from the kids. We were just excited not to have children around. We were like, woo! Our marriage is absolutely fine. 30 minutes in, I'm sitting there going, we are in the deepest troubles ever. Like, this is the worst decision we've ever made. And it was the reality that God began revealing in me my sin. See, I had one of those complexes that a lot of people have. So I felt like I was a pretty good human. I was like, I'm a decent person. I don't go around hurting people on purpose. And I go to church well, and I like to give money to people. Yeah. But the reality was, no, it wasn't. I was sinful. And God began really exposing that sin. And he revealed it to me. He pulled back the curtain and let me see who I really was. I remember sitting there in the hotel room that night, bawling. Tears running down, getting in my ears, just making little pulls there. It was just awful. It was that sad, sad cry. And I just remember feeling like I was the most unworthy person I could imagine. And then I remember Christ telling me, I still love you. I got a plan for you. And so I gave up. That was the night I gave up. I surrendered. I said, God, I've tried my plan. My plan has made me miserable. My plan has not worked like I wanted my plan to work. So you got me. Whatever you want from here on out, I'm yours. That was not an easy task, I promise you. And it wasn't like a switch flipped as far as like all of a sudden I got all these wonderful blessings in my life. No, it was work. I began to discipline myself. I began reading my Bible. We found a loving church in Living Water we began to attend regularly. And then Christ began to grow and pour into me on a regular basis. Which leads me to the next part of the text. In chapter 12, verse 2, God makes it clear that he wants to make your name great. And he will make your name great, not you. That's a hard thing for a guy who's trying his whole life to accomplish something, who's hard-headed as well, by the way. This is fun. So, to lead up to that, I want to ask you, what comes before Genesis 12? Oh, man, they got my joke. That's such a dad joke, isn't it? It's so good. My kids did not laugh at that joke. My wife laughed at that joke, though. That was great. Thanks, dear. But in Genesis 11, what we actually see is the story of Babylon. What's key there, what I always thought was so intriguing, is the use of making a name. In Genesis 11, you see people come together because they want to make a great name for themselves. In Genesis 12, you see God calling Abram. He says, I'm going to make a great name for you. Isn't that beautiful? I mean, that's amazing to me. I mean, that just, God wants to make a great name for us. It doesn't mean worldly, successful name. God wants to use us to glorify him. He wants a people who desire to honor God. So I spent a large portion of my life playing football, as we talked about before, and one of the great dreams I had from a small age was being a great football coach. I realized when I hit high school that 6'1" wasn't going to cut it in the NFL. Neither was my slow 40 time. And so I chose the route. I knew I was going to one day stop playing, and I got blessed to play longer than I probably deserved to, but one day I wanted to be a coach. And so I used to idolize guys like Vincent Barty, Lou Holtz, John Wooden, Mark Richt, and then we're not touching Dabo or you. I don't know how many Clemson fans. I know that there's at least one in here, and we're just gonna keep sliding by. I didn't mention Saban, so I'm glad I didn't do that, right? So my entire life was geared toward pursuing a career in football. I made connections. I studied hard. I pushed men. I motivated people. And I did everything in my power to will myself into a position to create a great name for myself. That's what I wanted. But as God began changing my heart, he also began changing my desires. And so for about 2 years, from 2014 to 2016, I continued coaching. I was still involved. I coached at the high school at North Myrtle Beach. I was still very goal-oriented in the sense of I wanted to go and be a head coach at some point, and I was pretty sure that that's what I was going to do. But things began to become a little more difficult. My passion for football kind of began to subside. Things that I used to find joy in did not bring me joy anymore. I was finding my joys in other places, and I was serving more at the church, and it became difficult to do both things. I wanted to be a better father, and I couldn't do that. I wanted to be a better husband, and it was hard to do that. And I remember the fall of 2015, the end of the season came, and I was actually like kind of relieved. I was like, and that's the first time I could honestly say that. I was like, that's weird. Usually, even on bad seasons, I've had some bad ones. I've had some 0-11 seasons. You're sad when the season ends because it's the end of the season. But I was just relieved, and I was like, this is weird. So I thought maybe I need some time off. My wife was pregnant with our last child, Benjamin, and I wanted to take some time off for her to help with the kids. So I was going to just cut everything off. I'm not sure if that was my idea. I'm probably sure it was her idea. But either way, we were going to take some time off from football, from school, just everything, and just focus on our family for a little over a month. So my son was born in May. I come back on July 11th. These are some funny things. I don't do dates well, but there's some things that just stick with you. So July 11th, I returned to work. I'm thinking, all right, I've had a month off. This is going to be awesome. I'm excited. I was miserable. I remember coming home, and I was just like, that was the worst day of coaching I can remember. It just was nothing there. It was just miserable. And this is odd, because I at this point had invested over a decade into this career, and I'm like, I don't know what's going on. That night, I was serving at our church. We have Super Mondays, and Herb Revis was there. And Herb said something, and this is not a direct quote, but this is the point of what he was trying to say, and it's pretty close. He says that our joy was directly related to our obedience. And I couldn't figure that out. I was like, I don't have joy, so what am I doing wrong here? Well, that night, I pulled a Jacob, and I just started wrestling with God. I was like, I could tell God was moving me from coaching. I knew this. I didn't want to know it. I was like, God, I've spent years just preparing for this. You're asking me to throw away like 20 plus years of what I've been preparing for. This doesn't make any sense. What are you doing to me? Why? Thankfully, he didn't break my hip. And if you don't know that story, I'll tell it later. And he won. That next morning, I left to go to work. I didn't say nothing to anybody. I walked into my coach's office. I sat down and said, I'm done. I said, I'm done. I said, I will finish today because I'm a man of my word. I will be here today. If you need me any more this week, I will help. But I'm done. This will be it. I came home. I told my wife, I said, hey, I got a great gift. Now, the 12th of July is our anniversary. So I was like, I got a great anniversary gift for you today. I quit football. She was ecstatic. Yeah. And you got to understand, being a football's wife is hard. It's harder than being a football coach. And so for the last 10 years that we had been together, she was tired. And she was tired of it all. And so she was excited. She also knew how miserable I was because I'm not good at hiding my misery. And then misery loves company. And so I had quit. And for the next few weeks, I was just living in this kind of weird, like, haze. Like, I can't believe I did this. This is going to be what am I doing? But God began blessing us. But my concern was at that point was, who was I? I was always either a football player or a football coach. I was Coach Grawl. Now I'm just a dude. I'm just a guy. Who am I? Genesis 12:3. God desires to use his people to be a part of his salvation plan. See, Genesis 12 establishes God's plan for Abraham. He promises Abram that he will bless those who bless him, curse those who curse him, and use Abram's family, God's people, to bless all the families of the earth. God's promise has not changed. God does not change. He's faithful. People change. Hearts change. Circumstances change. But God doesn't. God's salvation plan, his plan to redeem and save all of creation, involves his people. The church, including this one, including every Christ-honoring church, is his people. And we're part of his plan. Needless to say, the next year was a very strange year. It was awesome and amazing and weird. It was the first season that I can literally remember where I did not have something with football related. And you got to understand, from the age of like 10 till 2016, I had organized everything in my life around a football schedule. And I didn't have that schedule anymore, so I didn't know what to do. And God began filling my life with amazing opportunities. I began to work more in the church and serve more. But as 2017 began to roll around, I began feeling this heaviness in my heart. God was calling me to something, and I didn't understand it. And to be honest with you, outside of his call for my salvation and full forgiveness, full obedience, and the call to walk away from football, me and God had not had a lot of back and forth. You know, like, I can't tell you too many times I'm like, God said this. And so this was a struggle for me. This was the first time where I was really like depending on God to give me a true, solid answer in a real way. And so I did what I only knew what to do, which was
it's kind of like if you've ever sent a text message to somebody you love, and then you're waiting for them to send it back, and it's like, all right, look, I sent that at least 10 minutes ago. Or if you're texting Tom Gore in the back, and you're like, hey, I need some information, and he never texts me back. Thanks. It's crazy, like, because when I grew up, and I know you guys, a lot of you guys can relate to this, like, you write a letter, you got to wait a week to get any kind of communication, right? And if you wanted to call somebody, you had to go to a landline. And, you know, your mom couldn't call and check on you. Like, you know, it was just, and the funniest thing for me is commercials, because growing up, a commercial was a great opportunity to get snacks or go run to the bathroom, right? Like, is that not, like, for me, that was what it was. Like, oh, quick commercial break, time. My kids lose their mind if a commercial, they don't even understand it, because we don't have regular TV. So if a commercial comes on, they're just losing their mind thinking that the show randomly ended. And I'm like, no, this is patience. We're learning. And they don't have patience. In fact, to be honest with you, I feel like this next generation coming up is going to struggle with some patience. They're going to have a hard time waiting. And that's what God was teaching me during that time. He was teaching me some patience. During fall of 2017, I had to learn patience. As I wrestled with this next calling, and I was eager to go do something for God, eager to fill that void that football had left, and I was like, all right, God, what am I going to do now? Because you took the purpose of my life up to that point was coaching. Now I didn't have a purpose. My wife and I began having a heart for missions and really wanting to serve. And especially with our family and with our young children, we were like, we want to really get involved and get them into mission work and just expose them to that. And so we began thinking about things like African missions, South America, and everywhere we looked, nothing clicked. Nothing seemed to work out. God began drawing this recurring idea about Cuba in our mind. Kept putting it on my heart. Now, I'm like, that seems absurd because I don't speak Spanish. I don't know anyone from Cuba. And they like baseball. Clearly not, again, football body, okay, so keep in mind. And their alternative to baseball is soccer. Again, football body, not. So I didn't see the connection. I was like, God, I don't know what you're doing. Back in verse 1 of Genesis, we see how God was going to show Abram the land of promise after Abraham was obedient. He didn't say, hey, look, I got a place called Canaan. It's right over those hills. We're just going to walk over there. It's going to take about a month or so. We're just going to walk straight there. God said, I need you to leave everything and follow me, and I'll tell you where we're going to go once we get going. it seemed to me that, and it's been a recurring thing, that as I'm obedient, God reveals what he needs me to do. He very rarely shows me up front exactly what I need to do. He forces me to rely on him. So January 2018, January 2018, I told my wife, I said, wife, Erin, God's calling us to serve in Cuba somehow. And I don't know what or how or why. I just know that he will not leave me alone. And that this is something I know I have to do. And my wife's like, okay, let's do it. She's way more faithful than me. It took way more convincing. It took like 1 minute for her. But she also has a full understanding how good God is and that he'll provide. So not knowing where to start, I reached out to some friends from FCA, Fellowship of Christian Athletes. I had one person I could email. So I emailed them and said, hey, look, this is something I'm interested in. Help me. In the course of a week, various emails and phone calls, and 1 week we were talking with Alex Martinez, who is the head of MADEM, which is a very large evangelical outreach program in Cuba. He's a Cuban national, and he works with over 150 churches, ministering to youth through athletics. It was just baffling. I was like, how in the world did this happen? This is insane. Because if you don't fully understand, Cuba is one of the most difficult places to communicate with, contact, go to in general. It's just hard. The whole place is on lockdown. It's not easy. And so for me, I was just blown away. I was like, all right, God. So we kept walking. A few months later, God began working other miracles. I actually got invited to go with another group to Cuba. The date that they were coming back was the day before my passport expired. I was told with 2 weeks in advance to get everything together. I was like, okay, I guess we'll just hope that the plane doesn't get stopped or delayed. This is great, God. No, I love this. Again, uncomfortable obedience, right? Uncomfortable obedience. So I got on the plane. Well, as I landed, I found out that their team left without me. I'm like, great. So I'm in a country with a dude I've never met except over the phone. And I got to spend the next 4 days seeing God's work down there, and it was amazing. And I'm so thankful that I didn't go with the other group. I'm so thankful that God did it exactly how we wanted to do it, because I was able to develop a close relationship and really see what they were doing and find out how I could best help them. And we began working with them. Our family began ministering down there. We've been down there multiple summers now. Obviously, this past summer's we couldn't, but it began a process of us serving somebody outwardly. God's rewarded our faithfulness or our obedience with a vision. And once we began taking that vision, he began showing me my true purpose, and he called me into vocational ministry. And that was kind of mind-blowing, to be honest. I wasn't the easiest kid to get along with. I was often in trouble. I went to a Baptist elementary school, and I swore that they had a painting of me. There was a little boy who was crying in the office, and I thought it was me. I was like, they must have got me in here. All the times I've been in here, they just needed a portrait. But God had a plan for me. And it took me being faithful to get to that plan. In Genesis 4, God reveals that he doesn't falter and he doesn't fail when we obey. We see that Abraham does one of the most amazing things in the Bible, where he just obeyed. It just says, Abraham obeyed. I was like, man, Abraham, you are awesome. And we all know what happens from that. From that comes the people of Israel, just as God promised. And from the people of Israel, we get Christ, just as God promised. See, God called Abraham to drop everything and leave everything and everyone and follow him to some undisclosed location. And it's pretty safe to say most of us aren't on board with that. Like, that's a hard thing to get on board with. Like, hey, I can't tell you where we're going, and you got to leave everybody, but come on. I know you are, Tom. God desired Abraham's full attention. He desired his full heart and his full reliance. And he desires the same from us. He wants to take us into precarious situations and uncomfortable places. Places that only He can work out a miracle. Places that only He can be glorified. And when we obey this, He promises He will never fail us. So that summer of 2018, we had a lot going on. We had our first missions work, and I began seminary in the same time. At that time, me and my wife were almost certain. We were like, we're going to be international missionaries. We're going to go serve the world. So, you know that old adage of if you want to hear God laugh, you tell Him your plans kind of thing? Yeah, that's what happened. God giggled. And so, as I started working through seminary, God began revealing to me what he wanted me to do. The first class I had was evangelism. It says, that's a useful class. Like, I can learn something there and use it today. Well, one of my teachers is actually a data collection person for Lifeway. And so he had 3 classes where he just did data. And there's a lot of numbers. And I remember at the time, like many Christians, we think of missionary fields as being somewhere not here, right? Just Africa, South America. God began changing that. He began showing me how much our area and our community and our country is a mission field. I understood there was lost people here. Like, don't get me wrong. I'm like, yeah, lost people are everywhere, right? Like, you can go anywhere. Those people over there, they'll really need us. What I realized was that God was trying to show me that people here really need us too. So I wanted to share you just a few of those numbers really briefly. Not all of them, but the ones that kind of hit me in the chest and kind of made me kind of turn my head. The first one was the statistic about people going to church regularly, right? So it's approximately 17%, but I always say less than 20. We know it's less than 20% of Americans go to church regularly. 91 million Americans live here today that didn't live here 19 years ago. A large portion of them are children from the age of 17 down, and 23 million of them are new immigrants who have moved here legally. And both groups are almost completely ignored by a large portion of churches. 1 in 5 people now are religiously unaffiliated. And this is the one that blew. These last 2 are the ones that just kind of set my world on end, if you will. There are almost 200 million unchurched people in America today. 200 million. And we are the 4th largest unevangelized, unreached people group in the world. Think about that for a minute. We're 4. China, India, Indonesia, and then us. And we're catching Indonesia. That blew my mind. I was like, what? The other statistic, I don't have it on hand, but I remember that there were more people from other countries coming to America than we were sending out. And I realized that to the other countries, we are the mission field now. It's flipped. We did such a good job of missioning the world in some areas that now they're coming back home saying, hey, look, we've got to fix some things from Mother Church. As I heard those numbers, my heart began to break and it began to change, and I realized I got to do something. Like, it's going to be years before I'm done with seminary. It's going to take years to learn another language. It's going to take years to learn culture and leadership ability, but I know all that here. I was born here. I know what it's like to be an American in our culture and where the real faults are and how to see through the facade that we can sometimes get. God began placing men and women in my life. He began encouraging my wife. He began encouraging me to just be open to some different ideas, opening doors. To be honest with you, before 2019, I had never even thought about church planting. I didn't even know what church planting was. I'd never seen a church plant. That summer was when John Gadlock and I began talking about church planting. And he mentioned it to me. He's like, hey, look, have you ever thought about this? Because he knew I was struggling with what I was going to do, because I realized international missions wasn't where it was at. I was supposed to be here. And so he said, hey, you need to think about this. This might be. And I was like, I don't even know what that is, John. Like, that sounds crazy. That sounds like a bunch of house churches, to be honest with you. I got to meet some people over the course of the next 6 months. My wife and I began really kind of looking at it, kind of dabbling in it. I got to finally meet Tom Gore. And Tom began telling me kind of what it actually meant to plant a church, what it looked like. How does it even happen? Because up to that point, to be honest with you, church planting did not look appealing. If you look at some of the numbers, it's like, man, a lot of these things don't always get off the ground well, and then they don't do well, or they have issues, and It's like, in our area, we had one, right? Is it just the one right now? I was like, that's not good. But then something began happening. Tom ended up getting hired by Waccamaw Baptist Association. And he became the full-time church planting outreach minister. I have completely butchered your title. But the reality was this. I was afraid. I was just afraid, like anybody else. I'm sure Abram was afraid. I was afraid because God was calling me somewhere I didn't see. I had no idea what he was calling me to. And I was just hesitant. I didn't know. And so I began praying and having people pray for me. And I got to a place where it's like I was more afraid of failing God than I was of failing in general, and failing in society, and failing in our culture. Two things that kind of stuck with me, two things that friends said to me, and I don't know if this is John or Tom, one of them did. It says, but if you don't plant the church that God's calling me to plant, it'll never be planted. God will plant other churches, but that church will never come off the ground. And the second one was I was reminded that I don't save people. I don't plant churches. God does that. God promised to make a great name. God promised to make a great people. He did not call me to do that. He called me to be faithful. He said, leave, go, do. So we prayed for God would shut doors that I have no business going into, to open doors where he wanted me to walk, which is strange because you would think a pandemic would be a pretty big closed door. I'm just saying. Felt like it. But as we begin going through the pandemic, things that should not have happened begin to happen. We were able to meet with, I was able to have time off, which I'm full-time teacher and full-time student and full-time dad and full-time husband. I got a lot, and we do full-time ministry work, so we were full of nothing else. But the pandemic actually let me take a step back, take a deep breath, and really kind of begin putting together like, all right, well, if God's calling us to plant a church, what is he calling us to plant? What does this look like? So we spent time in that. We spent time meeting with pastors. We spent time with Tom and John talking with our church, setting up a residency program. We began realizing as we looked around and talked with our neighbors for the first time. I had a neighbor for almost a year. I'd never spoken to him other than hi. I know, don't judge me. I get it. It was wrong. I should have done better. But I was busy. Right? Like we get busy. So I was able to meet with him and begin talking with him. And I realized how much of a need people have right now. For the first time in a long time, people are actually asking the question of what is this all about? What does this mean? They actually are open to the idea that God is here, that there's a purpose to life. And so as I close today, I want to share with you a couple reasons why I personally believe church planting is important. One, in our area and in every area, but especially our area, church planting is needed bad. You heard some of the numbers already. But Horry County is the fastest growing county in all of South Carolina. It's the fourth largest county in South Carolina already. At one point, and the numbers are always skewed, so in one study I found that at least 31 people move here every day. Every day. Long's area is supposed to triple in size. It has a 367% projected growth over the next 20 years. It is the fastest growing area anywhere on the coast. It's supposed to explode. Right now, if you've driven down 9 lately, you've seen the buildings. D.R. Horton is building a 200-home complex, and right beside it is another 100-plus home complex going up. Down 905, there's 3 others going up, 100-plus each. 7,000 permits for building homes was put in this year already. There's a lot of homes. People got to live in them. Where are these people coming from? Half of them are coming from the South, and half of them are not. So we got a lot of people who might want to go to church, but we have a lot of people who don't want anything to do with church. And all of them need a home. And we have to work as a church together to make that happen. Church plants, like the one we're planting, need a church. They need churches to help them. We need strategy. We need people praying for us. Ed Stetzer says that church planting is part strategy and part miracle. And it is, because God's got to work in people's lives. We need community support. We need resources that we wouldn't be able to have. Facilities, access, financial support. But churches need church plants. There was a study done by Ed Setzer as well, and it showed that every church that they did a study on, over 300 to 400, I think it was 300 churches, every church showed an increase in giving and participation in their own church while they were planting another one. 73% of the churches in America have nothing at all to do with church planting. They don't give, they don't do anything. Church planting gives churches are already established opportunities to have access to different demographics, different people, and be able to expand their own mission opportunities and their own evangelism outreach. Church planting also encourages established churches to begin preparing a pipeline of leadership so that they can begin growing leaders within their own church to be able to send out for the gospel. The last reason is church planting is obedience. See, we all know Matthew 28, 18 through 20, where Christ says, "Go and make disciples to all the nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost, teaching them to obey everything I've commanded you, and surely I'm with you always to the very end of the age." God's saying we're supposed to go to those who are lost. Next door, 1,000 miles, it doesn't matter. Go to the lost. We're to make disciples. We're supposed to invest time in them. It doesn't say go evangelize to them for 3 minutes. Oh, you're saved? Awesome. Let's say a prayer, and I'll talk to you next time I see you at the barbecue. Like we're supposed to actually spend time with them, believers and non-believers, of all the nations, including our own and including others, not just one or the other. Baptizing them. Now, this is the key part here. For Christians, baptism was the initiation into a community of believers for 2,000 years. Christ was calling us even from then to gather as a community, to come together and glorify God, to celebrate, and to go and repeat the same process, evangelize and repeat, and grow more communities. Church planting fulfills that commission. Are we willing to be obedient, even if it costs us comfort? Maybe it's an uncomfortable conversation with a friend. Maybe it's having to make uncomfortable financial choices so that you can bless other people. Maybe you're being called to a new land like Abram. Maybe God's got a new mission for you and a new season in life, and you've got to take a step of faith to a place that you can't see. I'm going to beg you to take that risk. I'm going to beg you to be uncomfortable for God. Let Him expand your boundaries. Let Him lead you and guide you. Finally, for those of you who maybe you haven't trusted Christ fully, maybe you were like me 6, 7 years ago, sitting in a pew doing the checklist thing. Maybe you don't want to give God full control. I'm going to pray that you will see your sin for what it is, a sin against God. And I'm going to pray that you'll recognize your need for a Savior. And that you'll know that that's Jesus Christ. And that whatever's keeping you from that obedience from God, that you're going to lay that down. So I'd like to close in prayer today. And I pray that you guys will keep us in your prayer. Church planting is not going to be easy. We know that. But we're excited because God has called us to a new land. He's given us a new vision. And we want to partner with you and share that with you. So let's bow our heads. Father, what a wonderful thing it is to bear the witness of your grace and your mercy in my life. God, and I thank you that for your unending grace, that you would forgive and use me to your will. I rejoice in your word, that you would have, that through your word, that we would have access to your wisdom and your grace, your power, and your salvation. Father, I lift up each person that's here today, that you would bless them with your vision, that you would give them a purpose to their life, that you would expose your great love to them. God, may they see their failings and repent. May they see your mercy and rejoice. May they see your purpose and respond. May your guiding spirit be among us, your people, as we leave today. I pray that you would inspire us through the Holy Spirit to reach the lost in our lives. Give us the opportunity to share the hope we have in Christ, Father. Break our hearts for those in our community who don't know Jesus. Turn our fear and our anger and our disdain into love, passion, and servitude. Father, I thank you for the words you've given me today. I pray that they were honoring to you. And we say all these things in your Son's name, Jesus Christ. Amen.
God's people said, Amen. Amen. Well, let's give Ross a hand. Thank him for coming and sharing with us. Now, about October of last year, I was invited to a church planting conference. And last October, so much stuff was going on, I almost didn't go. We were so busy with so many things. But I said, you know what? Church planting is something we haven't started at Loris in our local area yet. And I wasn't sure we could add it, but I would go and let God decide. While I was there, I got all these statistics, all this information, and I was simply told to start praying. That's all I was asked to do, was to pray. And then they put me together with Living Water and Mount Pisgah and Lakeside Church, and there's 4 of us that have been praying, what would God have us to do? And the first and foremost thing that God's laid on my heart is, there's a lot of unreached people around us, a lot of work that needs to be done. This pandemic has thrown me off. You know me, I love to go door to door. I love to go up to people, share. I love to go visit. And this is a weird climate. God has literally got me to the point where I'm going, my goodness, if we're not careful, we're going to lose churches everywhere. But at the same time, we've got a great and mighty and awesome God. And I believe that he can do super things. So I just want to tell you what I have had in communication with God about this. I said, God, there's only going to be one way that Loris First Baptist would be involved with a church plant with all that's going on with us and the local area. It would take a miracle. How many people think it would take a miracle to plant a church that would be successful? Oh, y'all think y'all can do it without God? How many think it would take a miracle? How many of you would like to be involved with a miracle? See, that's the way I'm looking. I'm just going to pray that if God's going to be, it would take a miracle with all that's going on. Number one, these northerners coming in, and I don't mean it in that fashion, but sometimes I go, man, they come in, but every once in a while we get a Wayne and we get Miss Beverly, and then I realize, guess what? Not everybody from up north is terrible. We get a Warren and a Jan, we get a... What I do know is every single one of them need Jesus just like I need Jesus. And we have a young man and his wife who are very much aware and very much trained to the pressures and all the things it's going to take to do it, and yet they're saying we're willing to do it. Well, you know what that is? That's a miracle right there. To take someone so self-interested in their own plans, their own goals, and then have a family that requires so much time and just say, you know what, we're willing to be used by God to do something that would be impossible unless God's in it. And so they're already part of the miracle. The question is, are we going to be part? But all I'm asking you to do is what they asked me to do, is pray. Pray. I never tell you guys what we're going to do. I just say, here's what I think God would like us to do. But in the end, when we get together in September, and actually it's going to be late September after Charlie's born, my first granddaughter, but I will be back. We will have a meeting and we'll get together, and part of that will be, what will God have us do in 2021? How many of you knew when we did this in 2020 that there would be a pandemic? When we were in 2019, we were preparing for 2000. How many knew there'd be a pandemic? How many knew there'd be a virus? We didn't know. How many know what's going to be happening in 2021? We don't know. So we need to be in prayer and ask God, what do we need to do? Because in 2017, we also didn't know it would be a pandemic. And you know what was one of the things on the list? I wouldn't have put it there if you didn't. We spent $30,000 to upgrade our live streaming processes so our shut-ins would have better quality. And I kept saying, what a waste of money. We only have about 12 shut-ins to begin with. Well, guess what? We're all shut-ins almost now. And the live stream becomes, God knew. Well, guess what? I believe if God wants us to be a part of it, he won't tell us everything. That's what right. He won't show us everything. But what he will do is say, if you will obey me, I will unveil the next step for each obedient step that you make. So let's be in prayer about that. Now, just before we close, we're getting ready to stand and we're getting ready to sing, and maybe you're here And Ross has said some things about himself that you may need to reflect on yourself. Who's in control of your life right now? Have you made your own plans? Have you done your own thing? If God was to tell you right now, I want you to plant a church, would you say, no, God? By the way, those are two things never should go together. No, God. What if God told you to leave right now and go to another land other than the Lord's? Would you say, no, God? What if God told you, hey, I want you to give more than you're currently given? Would you say, no, God? There's so many things that God could ask us to do. He asked Abraham to do it, and Abraham did, and now we look back and we say, wow, look how God blessed him. Well, guess what? I believe when we look back, if we go 5 years down the road, 10 years, and the Lord doesn't come back, I believe 10 years from now we're going to say, wow, aren't we glad Ross Grawl did not say no, God? And we get excited as we grow as a church. But you know what? It's going to be really fun to be watching their church grow too and know that we had a part of it. I love Christmas. But you know what? I don't like getting gifts anymore. I did when I was a child, but now that I'm not a child, I love seeing my children grow, and I love to see my grandchildren get gifts. You know what? It's going to be exciting one day to see the different churches that we've planted in this area, them growing and them having great things happen to them, and we're a part of it. That's what I'm thinking. But that's something we need to be in prayer about. But as we get ready to stand and sing, are you giving God control of your life? If you do not know Jesus as your Lord and Savior, like I said, I'll be one of the last ones to leave today. I'll make sure I do proper social distancing. We'll get in my office. This has happened the last 3 weeks. Some people have stayed by. I try and be as safe as I can, but I'll make sure you know about Jesus. If you would like to be baptized, I can talk to you about that. If you would like to know how you can be better used, I'll stay behind for that. If you would like to stay and talk to Ross about how you could help and maybe be a part of what he's doing, we'll be staying here until everybody's gone. But please don't leave if God's telling you to do something. Maybe you need to come to the altar as they're singing and just pray and say, Lord, I'm giving you control of my life, whatever that happens to be. It's a scary thing, but when you say yes, God, not no, God, that's when God shows you his miracles. So let's stand and allow God to work in your hearts.
Out of my longest sorrow and night, Jesus, I come. Jesus, I come into thy freedom, gladness and light. Jesus, I come to thee. Out of my sickness into thy hand, out of my want and into thy will, out of my sin and into thyself, Jesus, I come to thee. Out of my shameful failure and loss, Jesus, I come. Jesus, I come into the glorious gain of thy cross. Jesus, I come to thee. Out of my sorrows into thy home, out of my sorrow and into thy home, out of distress and jubilant song, Jesus, I come to
And now deacons will come and direct you out of your seats as we've done these previous weeks. Sing a little louder.